Welcome to Future Learners, the show designed to empower students, parents, and educators. Join us as we explore the ever-evolving landscape of schooling, learning, and what it takes to succeed in today's world.
This episode is brought to you by Euka Future Learning, Australia's largest online, full-time education provider for pre-K through 12 students seeking a flexible, relevant, and meaningful education. Visit euka.edu.au today.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Future Learners. My name is Brett Campbell. I'm the Chairman and CEO of Euka Future Learning, and I'm joined today by my amazing host, as always, co-founder and head of education, Ellen Brown. Ellen, welcome to another episode.
Thanks, Brett. Really excited to get started.
Awesome. Well, it was actually about our seventh take getting started into this episode. I think over my 15 years of recording podcasts, I've literally, I lost count at about 600 podcasts that I've done over the time. And it was funny sitting here this morning, just hitting the record button with you. And I think I had a brain explosion and I had to do a retake. Normally I don't retake anything. I just like it to be natural and normal. But I had a couple of brain explosions. So let's hope this episode goes a lot better than what it took us to get started. So today, Ellen, I want to talk about a topic that is very prevalent, and it really helps, and I think it will really help our listeners get a deeper and better understanding as to why a new way of learning, homeschooling, future learning as we call it, is becoming more and more and more popular. It's no longer catered to a couple of specific niche families. There's such a vast variety of families that are utilizing our program and so forth. And I thought it'd be a good opportunity for us to really share a number of these and really explain why tens of thousands of families are flocking to a new way of learning and a new way of educating their children. So you're ready to get kicked off?
I sure am. I guess, the first thing that I would like to say, and I know you've said it before in previous episodes, Brett, it's not that that school isn't right for some people. So school can be great for the right people. And so there's nothing wrong with that. And there's lots of people who find that experience a really enjoyable one. I myself actually really enjoyed school. But, it's recognizing that there's a lot of reasons, and we'll be talking about those, where school is not the right fit for the child or for the family for lots of different reasons. And so looking at those today will be really, really important.
And a couple of nuances to that as well is when you said it might not be right for specific families. Another way to look at it is it might not be right now, meaning a decision for you to homeschool your child or teach your child online, etc., doesn't necessarily mean it has to be a forever thing either. Like, we have lots of families who come to us and they might take up the program for a year and they're like, cool, they had their gap year and now they're back at school, or for whatever reason, whatever circumstance that the family may have. And we'll go through these. We've got a list of different reasons, the main reasons as to why families are flocking homeschooling. So let's kick off with the first one, and then we'll be able to, I guess, break them down as we go through. The first one here we've got, and also, we'll preface this in no particular order. They're all equally important based off where the family is currently at in their journey themselves. So whilst some of these may not be applicable to yourself or your family, for others it could be the highest priority of rank and order. So the first one here we've got is education flexibility. So talk to me about that. What do you mean by education flexibility?
Well, there's a few different ways of looking at that. I guess the first one we would say is if a child has a particular learning challenge, that can be a reason why homeschooling is really a good fit for them, because it gives us the opportunity to be flexible about the way they learn and what they learn, the pace that they learn. And the same goes on the other side for kids that are gifted. So we often will have students that, have been very frustrated about the pace in school and they're really needing to move forward. It might be that they're talented in a particular area and we can find students that are 3 years ahead in science because they have such a passion, or it could be that they're gifted across the board and they need that flexibility to be able to move ahead. So flexibility, so that we're looking at education to fit the child rather than trying to fit the child into the education system as it is.
And at a tactile level, just to add to that is, you might be sitting there going, okay, so what if my child has learning difficulties, not across the board, but only in a specific subject. So maybe maths wasn't their specific subject, right, for whatever reason, but they excel in English, or they develop in English at the level in which they, are in based off their age, etc. How that tactically works with the flexibility we provide at Euka is the ability, and we have lots of families in the situation, whether it is the gifted or the learning difficulty side of it, is that your child might be in grade 7, but they're learning grade 9 maths, or they're learning grade 6 maths, depending on where they're at. And that you can't unfortunately do that in a classroom setting, because no teacher can create 30 different bespoke learning outcomes for their students. So what it does is it puts a lot of pressure on and either side of it as well, because I think there's equally as much pressure by being held back from something, whether you're gifted in that subject or you just totally don't even resonate or understand the concept that's being taught in that time frame. So flexibility is a massive unlock for any human as they're developing and learning. I see it a lot in the business world, and as entrepreneurs go out into the marketplace to build a business, they might go and join a coach or someone who can help teach them, but they're in a group setting, and all of a sudden you're having to learn what everyone else is learning, but that might not be the thing that you should be learning at that specific time. And I always call that learning the right thing just at the wrong time. So the flexibility there, and we've got one of our students, actually, there was a PR piece a couple of weeks ago, and he's 14 years old, and he's about to go into university because he's that far ahead academically. So it's the beautiful ability to be able to have flexibility and autonomy of where you currently fit, because the other component to that is sometimes all you need is the understanding to be able to create the unlock for your knowledge to catch up with, let's call it the normal pace, right? So I remember when I was at school a lot, if I didn't understand something, I would just ask the question. I'd ask question after question after question. I was that probably annoying kid that would go, oh, but what does that mean? Why do you do that? What is that? And as soon as I got that unlock of, oh, okay, now I understand it, all the rest of the work post that became a lot easier. So sometimes it's not a matter of your child needs to be learning 2 years below. Some cases it might be, but a lot of the time when it comes to learning and development is you just need that understanding of what's actually being said there, and it makes all the rest of the learning and development take place. So let's jump into the next one, because we've got a few here and I want to make sure we can try and get through these. I know,
but Brett, can I just add one thing? The other side of that is not just pace, but even how a child learns. So sometimes we'll have a child that is a real hands-on kind of learner. They want to learn their maths because they're creating something or making something. They love their science experiments, but if you get them to fill out an activity sheet, it's the end of the world. And so with a program like Euka, the flexibility to be able to say, okay, let's focus on the hands-on learning, and then let's have a discussion. Activity sheets may not be that child's thing, but they've learned everything. But if, in the classroom setting, if you sit a child like that down and you say, show me what you've learned in this test, write down and fill it, and that's not the way that they're able to express their learning, then, you'll end up with a child who's actually quite brilliant at a particular subject, but isn't able to express that learning and is much better at a verbal description of what they've learned. And so being able to tailor a program to fit a child's type of learning style is one of the things that we do really well. Sorry, back on to where we were.
Kinesthetically is how majority of people... No, absolutely. Kinesthetically is how a lot of people learn best. We were thrusted into the classrooms a couple of 100 years ago, and you had to learn by auditory, like listening and being told, this is how it works. It's like, I'd much rather go and build said thing or look at said thing or get my hands on said thing and see how... That's why I really liked chemistry, because it was like, when you add this and you add that, it creates said explosion, right? Not that I was into the explosion part of it, but it was I've seen the outcome of doing the actual situation. The reason why at school I was really good at woodwork, so I got really high marks in woodwork. And that was because every day after school, I'd be out in the back building tree houses, and like me and my friends built like an entire street almost of tree houses, because where we lived backed onto some farmland and a river, and at one stage we had about 7 tree houses lining the river, right? And we got to a point where we accumulated so much scrap timber that we kept building and building until we got to a point where we had no more timber. We had to pull the old ones down so we could build a new one. But that really helped me through my life when I became a cabinet maker, and then built my own house as well, because I'd already had the kinesthetic hands-on learning. I knew what it felt like to swing a hammer versus here's how you swing a hammer, right? Listen to me as I talk to you about the hammer moving, or even watching a video is just nowhere near as advantageous to the depth of learning, right? So let's jump on to number 2, the opportunity to provide individualized attention. This is a really interesting one. So the concept of attention.
Yes, well, I would say that I was the opposite to you at school, Brett. If I didn't understand something, I would never feel brave enough to put my hand up and ask a question. And then I would be floundering until I could finally get it. And that wasted a lot of time. And, obviously my self-confidence was really low because, there's a lot of kids that would feel uncomfortable in a school setting, and it really depends on who's in your class. But if you've got someone in your class that makes you feel uncomfortable when you say something wrong, all of a sudden you're shut down. You're shut down for a whole year because you're not in a safe environment. So that attention that a parent can give you is really validation about making mistakes as part of the learning process, feeling confident to make mistakes and to try new things. And for a lot of kids, that's something that's completely new once they start homeschooling.
Yeah, it's these situations that happen in an early age that really predicate how most adults go on to live life, right? Yeah, I've done a lot of study around personality profiling, psychology, etc. over the many years, because I'm just fascinated by people and why we do the things that we do. And yeah, when you look back at it, you're right, and I totally get it. Not every kid was like me, and nor would you want a classroom of kids like me, to be fair. It'd be chaotic. But all it takes sometimes is for someone, you to speak up, and you to be labeled as you're an idiot, you're dumb, you don't know what you're talking about. And then generally what someone like that does as they grow up is they need to find every morsel of proof, and they need to be so right about their decisions, and that's where you get it, that type of personality of someone who needs to dot every I, cross every T. They're going to have spreadsheets galore, because unfortunately back in their schooling days, in most cases, and if you reverse engineer this and you follow a little bit of timeline therapy and you go back to what caused someone to be the way they are, and it stems from these early years of your relationship with learning and education. So I just want to go back to number 2, where we talk about the opportunity to provide individualized attention. Let's make sure we tackle that one. So the concept of individualized attention.
Yeah, so I would say, it isn't a situation where a parent sits right beside you while you're homeschooling, or you don't have to sit right there with your child and say, oh, you haven't done this right, or you haven't got onto that yet, or anything like that. It's more of the support that a parent can provide as a child is learning. So, the Euka teachers have put the lessons there and put all the content that the child needs. But when the child has a question, there's someone there. Or when the child's done something that they're proud of, there's someone there. There's that reinforcement that they need to feel confident in what they're doing and to move forward in their learning. And that is something that's very unique to a home environment.
Yeah, I was listening to a podcast the other day actually around this concept of reinforcement of learning. And I can't remember the exact stat. However, it was much greater statistically when you gave students feedback on effort versus their personality. I mean, instead of going, wow, you're amazing, You know, I can't believe how clever you are. That is nowhere near as advantageous as, wow, what an amazing effort you put in there, right? I've seen how you went about this and you solved this and you did this. It creates that reinforcement mechanism of, oh, I want more of that. Like I love praise and I know how I got that praise, so I'm going to go and do more of that so I get that extra praise. And, you know, for me, when it comes to individualized attention, it is that sometimes it's just knowing that you can ask a question if you need to, versus a lot of the times in a classroom, you know, you can get drowned out and you might not, one, feel comfortable asking a question, or when you do ask a question, the teacher may not get to you, or you don't get the outcome you're looking for. Or a lot of the time what happens is a teacher may come up to you and go, oh, it's this, 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 and this. And it's framed in such a way that you should know that now because I've just shown you this, and you don't want to go, well, I still don't know what you mean. Like it takes a lot of guts to be able to go, no, still don't understand what you're saying. And and I see this even in adults right now, right? Even with our team, and I'm talking to some of the team and I'm trying to explain something and I'm like, does that make sense? And sometimes I might go, yeah. I'm like, wait on a minute. That doesn't seem convincing that it does make sense to you. Maybe I need to explain it differently, or the way that I explained it to you wasn't right. Because just because you explain it in a certain way, it doesn't mean that the other person is going to pick that up, right? It's funny when you have conversations with people and you say, oh, sorry, I don't know what you mean. And then they say the exact same words back to you. It's like, okay, what I probably should say is, can you explain that to me slightly different?
Yes, and that's very tricky. It's tricky in a classroom, like you say, with 28 children, to be able to explain it in a way that each child will really grasp that piece of information. But, you know, learning is always most effective when you're in a safe environment where it's safe to fail and it's safe to ask. And so that individualized attention that you get homeschooling is pretty special, because in school, really, the success comes down to just having the right teacher. And you can have a great teacher. There's lots of great teachers. But as a teacher myself, you know, some groups, some classes you get one year are just a really difficult mix of personalities. And then the next year, it's a real smooth sailing one. So it's just the luck of the draw when it comes to your child's success in the classroom that particular year.
Yeah, and for parents sitting there going, but I'm not a teacher and I haven't done teaching degrees or anything, it's like, you're not needing to be a teacher, you're a mentor, right? And when you've got a program that you can follow along and yeah, the reality is probably sometimes your child's going to get an answer and you're like, I don't even know if that's true or not. Like, maybe I need to Google it myself. Look, that's going to happen, absolutely. You're not expected to know everything. When was the last time you sat down and actually worked through a specific curriculum as an adult, right? All right, moving on. So number 3, travel options. So the ability to travel. This one for me is an exciting one, and I think one that has started to take off a lot more. I know a few families I've talked about in past podcasts that, yeah, they'll travel 3 to 6 months of the year, and that's where they truly adopt hands-on learning. I spoke in the last episode, a friend currently right now, you know, they put a post on social media saying today's lesson is brought to you by the Rome Colosseum, right? They're literally at Rome and they're doing a history lesson in real time, in real life. I mean, that's pretty exciting for, if you've got the opportunity and the ability to be able to do that. But traveling doesn't necessarily mean you're traveling the globe on aeroplanes and so forth. We've got lots of families who, do van tours. They drive around the country. So that's a really exciting one, and I can see it becoming more and more popular when families start to realize that, you know what, we could just take our child out of school for a term. Like, let's just go on a 3-month road trip as a family. Like, we can actually do that. Like, your child isn't going to come back after 3 months and be at a loss of anything. If anything, they're probably going to be at a gain of the life experience that they've had, through that period.
Absolutely. I'd even say to you, Brett, if you think back to the school days, perhaps an excursion that you went on, you would have learnt more on the day of that excursion than you ever would have learnt if you'd spent a week with a textbook about that topic. Have you got an excursion you've been on that you recall?
Yeah, well, I grew up in New Zealand, and we went gold mining. So in New Zealand, there's a little gold mining town in Waihi, and like we were literally down in the water panning for gold, where there's a lot of history there around the gold rush days and so forth. And yeah, that sticks out considerably. What also sticks out considerably is I didn't find any gold. I was a little bit devastated. There was speckles.
Your teacher probably did lessons before and after that gold panning experience, but the thing that you remember is actually the experience. So even when we're talking about travel, it's just as relevant to be talking about day excursions that you go on with your kids when you're homeschooling. There's not a week that goes by that you can't have a look at the program and say, oh, I see, we're learning about this week. Let's go off and have a look at where the council chambers is because we're learning about local government. Let's go have a look. Strangely enough, when I've been homeschooling my little ones, we did exactly that. We went to the council. Before we knew it, we were able to be introduced to the mayor, and it's just me and the kids. And it's interesting, even, I visited with the little ones, visiting the fire station. They have time for you, and they're very happy. People are always happy to be able to share their experiences. So they're such valuable experiences that can tie in with a child's learning. They'll never forget those excursions or travel moments that you have with them.
Yeah, and another really good reminder there is for parents is that don't discount actually how smart you actually are and what you know. Like, a lot of learning comes from experience and, time on the mat, as I talk about a lot. And there's lots of things that that you just take for granted that your child has no idea about, right? They've got absolutely no idea about. So never discount the extra learning that you could provide to your child, because it's not always just about, I need to follow this exact curriculum, I need to do this exact task. It's like, go off script, share more. Now, if Google was available back when I was at school, I wouldn't have needed to disrupt any teacher or my mum every 20 minutes to ask a question. I would have just been in Google trying to find things out, going, okay, what's this well? What's that? Why does the water, where does the water come from when there's a waterfall? Like, does it, and you're like, well, how does that work? And then all of a sudden you jump on YouTube, you can find extra stuff out, and then you're learning. Then you go and visit the waterfall and you put it together, and then the context of that learning is now solidified because you've learnt from all modalities. Next one, the number 4, work from home options. Again, this is a really big one, and we're seeing this more in a post-COVID world where remote working from home. So Euka itself, we're a fully remote company. We've got team members all around the world, and we are all fully remote. And we're one of many, many, many companies who have adopted that. And whilst I still don't think working from home is going to be for everyone, and nor will it ever be for every type of business, there's lots more families that are generating and creating flexibility within that. And what comes along with that is you realize that, I can actually work from home here, or actually I don't even need to work from home. I could work from somewhere else, which again ties into traveling. But the ability for you to be able to work from home, create an environment where you can still be a part of your child's development and growth and learning is a pretty exciting new horizon that's ahead of us. It's obviously already happening now, but definitely another one of those future prospects.
And I think I'm living the work from home experience myself in that homeschooling and working from home. Sometimes parents say, how can I do that because I'm working and I've got meetings, and how's this all going to work? And for some people during COVID, that wasn't very successful, generally because they didn't have the right tools. So Euka is written by the teachers for the students and to the students. So the parents don't have a handbook. They're not having to go through and teach a lesson, with a board or anything like that. It's all there for the student. And it's just about getting a really good routine together where, you put, a bit of a stopwatch if they're younger kids and say, for this amount of time, you can't disturb me because I've got a meeting on. And then after that, at this time, we'll get together and answer some questions. So it's about routine. It's about being able to be flexible with timing. You might say, you know what, we're going to do all of our schoolwork on this particular day and less on this day. That's one of the things about flexibility. But being able to work from home and homeschool your children is, just like you were saying a minute ago, the value of being able to share what you do with your children. They're learning so much more than just their own curriculum. They're learning about your job. They're listening into meetings. They're hearing and seeing what that particular role that you're playing is as well. And so it's just about being organized. And I got to say, I think it's less stressful than trying to pack them all off to school. And then you've got to rush back home and you've got to do your work and then you've got to rush back and get them from school. All of those kinds of things you don't have to worry about when you're working from home and homeschooling. So it's very achievable.
Absolutely. All right. So the next one, we've got number 5, negative school experiences.
So
Let's tackle that one.
Yes. Well, look, this is definitely a huge reason why people might decide to homeschool. So it could be anything from a bullying incident, a mental health incident that's come from the socialization, as they say, at school. There's certainly plenty of, and it could be some of those things that we talked about before, that the child's got a learning challenge and that hasn't been able to be met at school, or a giftedness that hasn't been able to be met at school. And so when a child comes out of the school system into homeschooling, sometimes there's a little bit of a time of adjustment, obviously, to get over that experience. It was really difficult for them. But what we do see is we see them thrive as they've got that individualized attention and a program that's fitting them. And I loved what you said before when you said, homeschooling might be for a season. And so what we have seen certainly in that case is a child's been removed from school for a while because they have had a negative experience and they're not ready to go back into the school system. The parent might want them, or the child might want to go back in at some point. But knowing that what you're covering during homeschooling is the same as what they're covering at school gives a child a time to get the help needed to overcome whatever that negative experience has been, so that then if the time comes that they want to be moving back into school, or it works best for your family, that they can move in being better prepared because they've been able to resolve whatever that experience had been. So it certainly is common that students will move into homeschooling after a difficult experience at school.
Yeah, and this topic in itself, I want to save for a full episode. I think there's so much that we can discuss and really help and share and add value around this specific topic, because it is a tough one. When you're dealing with emotions, and if you're not fully equipped with knowing how to deal with, most people struggle with their own emotions, let alone how do I adopt and adapt to someone else's emotions, and be that support and guiding light for that person and throughout their time. So I'm going to save some commentary there for another episode purely dedicated to that. So next one, we've got number 6 is the personal curricular options. And this comes back to what we were talking about in actual first episode about what are we excited about talking about, what are we excited about sharing. And when it comes to future learning, it's the ability to not just be locked into a curriculum either. It's the ability to be able to, if you've got a kinship towards entrepreneurship. So myself, I'm an entrepreneur at heart. I've always been a builder and a creator. I just love building and creating things. And I had to, before I got my first, let's call it sniff of entrepreneurship, was I had to move countries and put myself into specific situations to be faced with what entrepreneurship really was. And that was because there was really nothing as I was growing up that even talked about entrepreneurship, right? Where I grew up, you either went and worked in the mines or you got a job as a trade. There was never this whole thing about you can build your own business, you can go and create this product and help this many people. It just wasn't talked about. So now especially with our grade 9 and 10 opportunities that we have, we have over 120 different electives where students can choose something that they're passionate about, because all it takes sometimes is to find out you're passionate about something, and that unlocks an entire realm. So funnily enough, I remember it so vividly. I literally moved over from New Zealand, and I was on a train heading down to Sydney to stay with my sister. And there was this book called The E-Myth, and it's short for the entrepreneurial myth. And I didn't like reading. I hated reading at school. Every assignment that I ever went through, funnily enough, look back at it now, it's a form of speed reading that I teach, because all I used to do was read the table of contents. I'd go to the back of the book, look at what it's like. I'd read the first page of each chapter and just and that would be enough for me to go, okay, this is what I think this book is about, versus having to read it all. So I was always looking for a shortcut, right? And I got this book. I'm on the train. I was like, this seems interesting, the entrepreneurial myth. I wonder what that's about. And I sat down and I read it, and my phone goes off and my sister's calling me. She goes, oh, where are you? And I said, I'm at this train station coming up. She goes, you're an hour and a half past our stop. I'm like, oh. I was so engrossed in this book that I didn't want to put it down. And I was like, oh my God, I actually like reading. And it was because I was exposed to something that I clearly had a deep yearning for or passion towards. And that comes back again, this opportunity to be able to provide your children with content and information and subject matter that really gets them excited.
Absolutely. Like you just said about the book, when you are homeschooling, and certainly with Euka, we have that option for every grade level all the way up. If we'll provide a book and say, here's the activities for this book, but if this book is not what your child enjoys, then they can pick their own, and here's some activities to go with any book, and so, we should never be in a situation where a child's sitting there struggling through a book that they don't enjoy. That they've got choices is a big one, but the other things are topics that you enjoy or your family enjoy, outside the curriculum. Like basically the curriculum is the base. And then there's all this opportunity around that, whether it's certain activities that your family likes to do, or you want to add a faith base to the learning, or you want to add financial literacy, or you want to teach them about car mechanics because that's something you're familiar with. Then anything goes. And that's really exciting because, we hear of kids that are doing really well at Japanese because their next door neighbor is Japanese and they're spending the afternoon over there on Tuesdays, so just being able to find the resources in your community and things that you enjoy, things your child enjoys, gives them access to things that they really would not normally have a chance to learn.
Because there's a flip side to that as well. And I think I may be using this podcast is almost like a therapy session for me, actually going a trip down memory lane. The more we talk about it, the more it's sort of unearthing my experiences at school. But I could tell you a book that was actually one of the main reasons that I didn't like reading. And it was a book that was was part of the English curriculum at high school. And it was called Bow Down Shadrach. And it was about a horse that was being taken to the slaughterhouse. And I couldn't comprehend. I was like, no, we got horses out the back of our place. I didn't want to read this book. And I think that may have put me off books. So, but that in itself is when your child is exposed to certain pieces of learning or topics of learning, we've got to be very careful that we're not actually deterring them from wanting to continue on their learning development in many ways. Because, for me, potentially relating that disdain for books was that, oh gosh, why would I want to read a book? Like if this is what I'm going to get from it. So anyway, let's move forward. So we've got a few more here that we'll try and get through. So number 7 is, I think, something that more and more this is going to become important, and this is due to what's currently occurring in the world right now as it pertains to what are our children being taught. And this one is to be able to have more input into what your child is being taught. There's lots of debates going on right now, especially in America, with different types of books and should they be in the curriculum, shouldn't they? What should your child be exposed to and when? And who gets to make those decisions? I think that's a podcast in itself that I really look forward to to pulling apart as well. But on that topic of wanting more input, what have you got for us?
Yeah, look, completely agree with what you just said there, Brett. It's one of those things where I think COVID did open parents' eyes to the fact that they actually are well and truly equipped to be able to school their own children. They actually do it every single day and teach them everything that's really important in life without ever opening a book. And so there are topics, obviously the curriculum is the base, like we said, but we also know that there may be certain books or certain topics that you want to spend more time on or less time on as a parent. And that's really important to be able to have the voice as a parent in what they are learning, because there's nothing worse than them coming home from school and saying, oh, I learned such and such today. Now, they're going to say that about what their friend told them at school, and that's part of life. They're always you're not going to put like a shelter around them and say they're not going to learn anything I don't want them to learn. But, there are topics that maybe, you'll see a topic in the curriculum. Now, it'll depend on the teacher about how that's skewed, that topic, or what is shared. There's a lot of flexibility there, and it's not a fear-mongering situation, but it's about being an informed parent and being able to say, you know what, this is something that I want to be able to share with my child. It's important to us, and this is how we're going to share it, rather than say, other people will have exactly the same way of sharing something as I do. So it is becoming more and more important as we have so many areas now in our society where there are lots of divisions, I suppose. And so being able to provide a balanced input to what your children are learning is really important.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, next one. We have got, they've seen their children thrive during COVID. So this is sometimes I like to use the metaphor of you don't know what you know until you realize what you don't know, meaning the other side of that is when you start to learn something that you think you know something about it, the more you learn about it, the more you realize you don't know about it, and until you're really exposed to it, right? And COVID was a real big eye-opener. I think one of the biggest things that opened the eyes for me is how many people actually really enjoy being locked up at home and not going out in public. Like how I think what it did was it connected a lot of people to their introverted side of, it's actually nice, and I like assuming, you enjoy where you currently live in your life and so forth, but it was one of those quite an eye-opener. And then in this concept, you would have thought, oh, no, there's no way my child can thrive during COVID if they're locked up at home or if we're at the house, until you're like, well, wait on a minute, there's actually might be something in there. So share some thoughts around that.
Yes, look, we saw our numbers of students, balloon during COVID, and we thought, like everybody else, when COVID's over, everybody will be back off to school again. But we were really surprised to find that actually didn't happen at all. And we found that the parents who had been new to Euka during COVID had been so thrilled at how far their children had gone. And they were very surprised, because often we would hear from parents that would say, oh, I thought my child was doing really well. And then when I sat down with them and we actually did something together, I realized they'd been copying off their friend the entire year and they were nowhere near where they were supposed to be, but it hadn't been picked up. It is a tricky situation with 28 kids in the classroom. And when they get good at being able to check on their neighbours' work, it can be really tricky. So parents were able to identify areas where a child would not have necessarily asked a question, and then that snowballs. Certainly in maths, if you miss a couple of fundamental steps, it's all over Red Rover, and you start saying, I'm hopeless at that. But it wasn't that at all. It was just that a couple of steps were missed, or you weren't able to ask a question and validate what you were doing. And so COVID really gave parents a chance to be part of their learning, and they actually, on the whole, the kids and the parents that we had with us, we saw them really thrive and decide to stay on with us afterwards. That's not always the case. And like I said before, it depends on what tools you had. So if you didn't have something that was written to the child, it was a very frustrating time, and a lot of parents found it really difficult during COVID. But we found that parents stayed on. Their experience was very positive.
And the other important part about that is, again, the schooling curriculum is designed in a certain way to try and appease the majority, right, which it's been around for hundreds of years, let's call it. However, what it doesn't take into effect is what is the best way in which someone can learn. And there's zones, and put yourself in this perspective right now, like if you're learning something and you're going deep on said learning, the reality is a 50-minute time window, which is generally the time period of a class, right? Like at high school, we had 50-minute sessions. We'd have 6 different sessions a day on 6 different topics. Like, you're going to get to the end of the day and you're going to be bamboozled with what you've even gone through, versus during COVID, families had the opportunity to go, you know what, we're just going to do maths today, or we're just going to do English today, we're just going to work on this, or we're going to work on that. And again, this comes back again to flexibility, but flexibility is what ends up creating a little bit more flexibility if done correctly, right? And then you start to find these shortcuts in different ways on how you can actually live your life. Because that's what this really wraps up for me about, is it's not just how we learn, it's how we do life. Because learning's such an integral, important part of it. But once you intertwine all the other aspects of it, that we've talked about, from working from home, traveling, flexibility in education, the fact that you actually know a lot more than you think, and you could share and empower your child far more than you think. I guarantee you right now, there's things that you've learned and experienced that if you're able to share that and impart that wisdom onto your child, I mean, they're just going to be far greater off for it, right? So the ability, I think the underlying theme here is, it's not until you take this step, or it's not until you go, you know what? Because in COVID, you didn't get the opportunity. It's like schools were shut. It's like, geez, what are we going to do? We need to have education for our children. So that was a forced hand. And for many, many, many families, it was the best thing that could have happened. Obviously, the adverse effect of that, many families, it was possibly the worst thing that could have happened in many ways. But again, it's not until you're exposed to it that you can see the potential benefits. So we've got 2 more here before we wrap up, Ellen. Number 9 is, so your children can have the ability and more time for sports, hobbies, skill development, and things that they actually enjoy.
Absolutely. And you touched on that earlier, to be able to say to your child, okay, well, if you want to get your schoolwork done, you're a morning person, let's get it all done earlier. And, they can go off and do something that they're really interested and passionate about. It's not unusual for us to see on our Facebook group, pictures of a teenage boy just last week, and he'd created this billy cart thing that he had. And, just the fact that he's had time to explore the things that he loves doing and to get better at things that he wouldn't have had time. We've said it before, like, how many adults get to the end of their school life and have absolutely no idea what they like, what they're good at, where their passions lie, because it's just not time. So time doesn't even have to be filled up. Sometimes just being able to have time gives them opportunities to experience new things and to get out there into the world and do things. So obviously, I mean, you'd know about the different sports people that we've had that gave that, homeschooling with Euka has given them the time to be able to excel in the sports that they're doing, hobbies that they're doing. And like you said, just family life, having family life and doing things together is valuable learning as well.
Yeah, we got many students, professional athletes, X Games athletes. We got a family right now training for the next Winter Olympics. The reality is that training takes a lot of time and effort and energy, and the 8-hour school day is just not going to cut it for them, right? So they get in, do their education, get themselves up to speed, keep themselves, learning, so you can keep the learning muscles growing, and then they're going to spend the next 6, 7, 8 hours a day learning their craft that they're aspiring to move towards. And that again comes back to options, and I think we're moving into a world where options are becoming more primary in our decision making, where a lot of time I don't think too many families believe that they have too many options available, but that's obviously starting to spin around and become the opposite. So last one here before we wrap this up, Ellen. This is a really, really good one, and one for me that I personally think is the most important, and it's the ability to seek closer family bonds. The ability to do things together, whether that be, again, we loop back into excursions and working from home and traveling and all of those things. But essentially it comes back to, as a father of a young one right now, is the biggest thing that I would be most sad of is that Ayla's growing up so quickly, and I'm never going to, and this is every person, right? I'm never going to get those younger years back. So for me personally, I think I may have shared this on podcast so far, but if not, I took I took 3 years off of working, essentially retired, where I wanted to spend every moment with Ayla as she was growing up, and I didn't want to miss anything. And again, that sort of ties back into another story itself, but the bond that I will have as it pertains to those early years, and even now, obviously being able to work from home and do all of these situations, those are the memories that you're going to look back at and go, I'm glad I got to spend that quality time and I was able to create those memories, because that's really all that really matters. We fast forward 20, 30 years, your child's moved out, you get to see them twice, 3 times a year, depending on where they're living. If they're living in the same country, you're going to want to go, man, I'm so glad I got all this big memory bank. And it doesn't obviously stop after at school either, but it's create these memories young. I want to be, I want to be my kid's best friend. It's funny. I've got Ayla onto. I tell her all the time. I'm like, you're my best friend, and she's just throwing the word out now. Everyone's her best friend at the moment. But it's hilarious. But it's like, I truly want to do that, and if I truly want that to be a reality, where I feel that I want to create an environment where she can come and share and be open and honest with me, and vice versa. I need to create that environment. I need to be a part of the creation of that. It doesn't just come by, well, you're my daughter, I'm your dad, you have to tell me everything, because as we know, that's certainly generally not what happens. So yeah, building closer family bonds, I think that's a magical one.
Absolutely. It's interesting when the stereotypical teenager that is in their room and you don't know what they're up to and they barely say a word. Those kinds of things just don't exist, when you go through homeschooling and you're with them each day and you're part of what they're doing as their hobbies, and you're doing life together. So there's never that rift that occurs when you've said goodbye to them at 7:30 in the morning and they get home at 4:30 in the afternoon. What did you do? Nothing. And that kind of thing, that disconnect just isn't there. So, I'm getting the joy of that now. I guess it's the gold time now with teenagers in the house who are homeschooling, and, they'll get their schooling done. And one of them's been working on a motorbike this afternoon, and I've been able to, go down and say, how's that going? Oh, it's not going well. What are you learning? And like you said, Google's there, and just being part of those experiences means that those relationships are really close, and they've still got all their friends and their own private things, their own life that goes on, but we're doing life together, and it's not this family separated by, our own separate lives. So it is gold.
Absolutely. Well, Ellen, we're going to wrap that up right there. We've covered off 10 main reasons as to why tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of families are flocking towards a new way of learning and new opportunity. And I mean, as you go through them, it's almost so compelling that it's like, why would you not potentially attempt it? Why would you not give it a go? Obviously there's circumstances that everyone's going through and situations, but the exciting part is that we're moving into a world where a lot of these initial barriers that people may have had are starting to be able to be broken down. And for those families that have been on the fence for some time, they're able to now jump on and experience and see how it works for them. That's the main thing, because it's got to work for you, right? Working from home is going to work for some people. For some people, it'll just make them go crazy. You'll need to create a nuance and how you can do that better, and so on and so forth. But as we learn, we'll develop new and better ways to create bigger and greater impact. So with that being said, thank you for tuning into this episode. We appreciate your support. We appreciate all of you who have headed over to Apple iTunes and given us a 5-star review, and especially a comment. Thank you so much. It helps us get this message out to more and more families who want and need it. And if you haven't so far, please head over, give us a 5-star review, share this episode with someone that you think would get some value from it. We're always open to feedback, so please feel free to comment wherever you are and let us know what you're enjoying most about the show. And if you have any specific topics that you'd like myself and Alan to unpack, we've got some really juicy ones coming up, even just out of this, that we'll be able to deep dive in and explore. So once again, thank you very much for listening, Alan. As always, an absolute pleasure. I will see you on the next one.
See you then.